Everybody, this is Talkative Carl back again for another movie review month. Already took care of Father's Day review month with a lot of the Indiana Jones films and one other film that is escaping me. We can check that out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl. And of course, leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. It'll help me out immensely, and it'll help you out when you're notified whenever I have new videos up. Follow me in the links in the description below, like my Patreon, Twitter, Twitch, where I'm usually live, Instagram, so forth. And now is, I know it's the couple of days after the 4th of July at this point, but it still doesn't negate the fact that I want to do a just like last year, I did a review month with doing a lot of America-centered, reviews. Last year, I did a bunch of Captain America stuff, comics, movies, which you can check out on my channel as well. But here, I'll be covering both National Treasure films as well as the TV show. Not back to back right now, but I'm going to start off right now with the first one, starring Nicolas Cage, a literal national treasure. I just love, he's a very unique actor. The fact that there's no movie that he was in that I ever hated. Because I reviewed a lot of Ghost Rider films. Matter of fact, I want to review this year at some point Face Off. Because honestly, probably my favorite Nicolas Cage film out of his whole repertoire. And I don't care what anybody says, he was an amazing Ghost Rider. He loves Ghost Rider too. And the fact that he's dedicated to the role, and it's I really hope he comes back for the MCU as Ghost Rider, along with the guy who was playing the bad guy, one of the Terminators in one of the recent Terminator films, and he was also Ghost Rider in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Robbie Reyes. So I want him to be Robbie Reyes' Ghost Rider for the MCU. I'm just shocked nobody tried to reach out to him or anything like that, because he was amazing. But anyway, after going through the Indiana Jones stuff, it's let's go through some more treasure hunting kind of stuff. And I really want to do the Tomb Raider films, including the reboot one, because we want to rewatch that rebooted one. But this movie stars Nicolas Cage as Benjamin Franklin Gates. I know, bear with me. Sean Bean as Ian Ho. Diane Kruger as Dr. Abigail Chase, Justin Bartha as Riley Poole, John Voight as Patrick Henry Gates, and we got Harvey Keitel as Agent Peter Sadusky, and Christopher Plummer as John Adam Gates, the Benjamin Gates' grandfather. Second here. So, anyway, sorry. This is a fun movie, and here's the thing. Part of me wishes there was a third film, because these films were pretty fun, and that's. I was watching the Kevin Smith podcast, and Mark Bernardin made a point about comparing Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones films. And I tend to agree with him on this, and I didn't bring it up in my reviews of those films because I did mention in my Crystal Skull review that, after so many years, it's been like 15 years since Crystal Skull, and rewatching it after so long, because I already saw it like twice, once in the theater and once again when it came out on DVD back in the day. And it's been so long since I've seen it, I made a point that, okay, we had like so many other worse movies that it makes Crystal Skull a breeze to go through. And Mark pointed out that comparing Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny, it seems that Dial of Destiny, at the very least, you should be having fun with this. And nobody, and like Andy wasn't like, cracking a smile throughout this film. And at the very least, in Crystal Skull, it seems like everybody was having, at the very least, a good time with this. There was no problematic issues so far as we know behind the scenes or anything like that. Everybody seems like where you disagree or agree with the narrative, at the very least, we was having a good time. People was cracking smiles and making quips and stuff like that. A fair amount of stuff, not no Love and Thunder level excessive quips. And there is a lesson. Well, they both had lessons, but it seems like, I don't know. The point I'm getting at is that when you come to these kind of treasure hunting, world traveling adventure type of films, it has to be fun, and National Treasure films are fun. And honestly, you hear Nicolas Cage, it's like there's a map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And there's been like, after this movie came out, there's been like I distinctly remember so many of like the History Channel and everything like that. It was all like, there was like a whole thing where historians and scientists and archivists are like going to the looking on the back of the Declaration of Independence and making sure there of course they said there's no map on the back of the Declaration of Independence, but can you honestly believe them? Because if they were something, do you think they'll tell the general public and have some crazy amount of stuff going on with like people trying to steal it or potentially causing like harm? But honestly, it left like a deep impact. Now, as far as like making a third one, I'm hesitant because it's after so many years since the sequel. Like, could they make it work the same way? Of course, sure, this movie came out in 2004 and the other was like a few years later, and it was still in like the internet age. But with smartphone, because that's a drawback with like these like treasure hunting movies where you gotta solve clues and everything like that, or riddles. Well, maybe not all puzzles, but a significant amount of puzzles can easily be solved if you have like a smartphone where you can like Google a riddle and see what the answer is. And it kind of sucks the fun out of using your brain. But that's the mark of a good writer if they can like weave some narrative where like just because you're in like the modern age doesn't mean that you can't find riddles for the characters to solve that they can't use their phone to like just easily look up. But man, I was so like, when this movie came out, I was like, is that really a map behind the Declaration of Independence? And would they really tell the general public? I don't think so. And like with the sequel, Book of Secrets, there's a whole because it actually is true in Book of Secrets that the president actually has these kind of things that they leave behind and stuff that they know or start to know. They add like a passage. Each president add like a passage into this sacred book, but the general public cannot know. Nobody can know. Only the person who sits in the seat of the presidency were privy to whatever knowledge is in that book, and they leave something behind for the next president. Whatever secrets or trials and tribulations they go through, there's only they have that sacred knowledge to. They leave behind and things like that. So it's like, yeah, they would not tell the general public for any myriad of reasons. We only just now being cool with the government Area 51 just like being a little bit more transparent with about like extraterrestrials, and like certain about like flying saucers that in the past they would have just been like, no, that's just a weather balloon, no, don't look at, and then like trying to make like a deep secret. That's probably because millennials are old enough to be in those seats now, where that's like when they was young, they always wanted to know that the older generation would like stonewall us. Now it's like, no, we want to know too, because that is very weird out there. And so we want the masses to be like prove that information, but not everything, because I don't think none of us really want to know what's going on behind the scenes, despite the whole Trump situation, blurring out every doggone thing and causing this upheaval. The general public do not need to know every little thing that's going on with like the president, or at least our government. You just need to know that like you got a handle on things, so that way it'll cause mass panic. But anyway, Ben Gates, as a little kid, talks to his grandfather, who explains to him about the Gates family secret, that they were related to a driver John's grandfather, who was the no, not his grandfather, but maybe like his great grandfather, Charles Carroll, passed like a secret to like a hidden treasure hidden in America, because there was a part of like the Knights Templar or Freemasons, and it leaves like a phrase, like some kind of secret phrase on a note that says the secret lies with Charlotte, which turns out to be a ship later on. And this treasure was accumulated since like the times of medieval knights, where well, hell, even before them, it's like this treasure that was like accumulated from all these different like societies in the past, up to the point of the Knights Templar, when they was entrusted by their king to find this secret treasure, which they did, but they realized, okay, this is a too much amount of wealth for one king or emperor to have. So they took a sacred oath. They gathered this up, they hid it away somewhere, and throughout time they each like left clues along the way, and until like the Freemasons during like the American Revolution, it was down to them to like keep it hidden here, so that no one man can lay claim to this massive amount of wealth, because that could tip the balance in favor of one nation above all else. Even though the Freemasons by and large were Americans at this point, they still knew like, okay, not even the president on their own should own this great amount of wealth, because that is just too much power for one person, let alone one nation. So Carroll left his driver this bit of information, because he tried to go to his president, the president he knew, the president at the time of it was like just Mike, the president at the time of 1832. He couldn't be reached. So knowing he was about to die, he's like left that information to his driver to keep secret. So that information been passed down through the Gates family, and of course Patrick, played by Jon Voight, who is the skeptical one in the family, because the Gates family has been trying to find this secret treasure for years and never been successful, and became a mockery in like the historical society. So now it's down to Ben, who, according to this one little line about them, about him, you know, being like a former ROTC guy, like a cryptologist, you know, a historian, treasure, all these, you know, chemical engineer, all this different stuff that fully explains why Nick Cage can just do, you know, find out and do whatever. So him with Riley and Ian and his men went out to the Arctic and found Charlotte. And once inside, they discovered inside one of the, you know, gunpowder barrels, this what you call it, the meerschaum pipe. And inside this pipe is like a thing where yeah, he, like, you know, put his blood in so he can roll into this parchment, and it left behind like a message about like iron pen. And they soon discover, because the, you know, it's not just talking about, and it's talking about a pen, but a very important pen, probably the most important pen in history. And this leads to the back of the Declaration of Independence is a map leading to this massive treasure left behind by the Freemasons, which leads to a lot of people, which a lot of people have this kind of like it's not even just with national treasures, all like treasure hunting type of movies, where these people sometime long ago leave behind this sacred, you know, object or treasure or whatever, but also leave behind clues for somebody to find. If you want something to be hidden, why leave behind clues for somebody to follow the breadcrumbs to and reach? And of course, you wouldn't have a movie if they just did that, but it's kind of like, it's always like a thing with a lot of these adventure type of movies. Like, why would you leave behind clues for somebody to eventually get the object you want to keep hidden? And you have almost like a good reason to hide it. But as Ian pointed out, it's like a treasure is something that important. You would, you know, like put it on or behind or hide it with something of even greater importance, knowing that it will be securely protected for all time. That would have been like I mean, honestly, that would be like an ingenious way of hiding something. You put it behind something so sacred that no matter how far in the future, you know that this sacred, you know, thing will not be harmed in one way or shape or the other, and whatever is like attached to it will equally be preserved. But knowing that, you know, historians and archivists and the FBI and, you know, a bunch of higher forms of government would not just allow them to run tests on such an important document, in you know, because of, you know, the danger of harming this thing, because it's so old. And it's, you know, because I went to DC one time, you know, it was in my early teens, and me, my younger brother were there so we can see like the Declaration of Independence, and it's like this big, you know, huge document, and it's like, you know, yes, you know, me as a black man and knowing how after the American government wasn't wasn't too kind to my people throughout the years, and my people helped build this nation to what it was, along with many other races along the way. But I still understood, despite the founding fathers, and that's being a Disney movie. They can't. If you made National Treasure today, there's no way somebody won't have to write in the fact that you can call it cynical, but if National Treasure, if it was like a third one, you have to write in the fact that the founding fathers were slave owners, and but being like this movie obviously made the founding fathers are kind of glorify them, or I won't say deify them, but mystify them because of what they built. But they didn't build it for everybody, but we don't know what was in their heads at the time. But it's if you look at it this way, it's kind of ingenious the way they specifically word the document in a way where it's malleable, where each generation can build on top of it and improve it long after they have died, because it's like all men are created equal. And of course they may not have been evil men, but they still were slave owners, so they were still probably the problem. But maybe if you look at it this way, they had hopes that someday, some future, where there wouldn't be any slaves and people wouldn't be oppressed, and men can walk among other men in solidarity and all the other stuff, things would improve. And of course, the thing, it's just it's like a foundation of where we kind of built upon, or like a trunk of the tree where we can add branches to make it, because the pursuit of happiness is, what this country is built upon, where it's we're not perfect, which, a lot of people depending on what side, left or right you on, force upon perfectness, but we're not perfect. We're fallible. There's no human on the face of the earth that's perfect. It's the pursuit of happiness is the overall goal, where it's we constantly try to, be better than we used to be. And that's something you can hold on to, and that's what, when I see that, document, and we should all see that document as the foundation of what this country stands for and what we are striving to be. So Ben Gates decides, okay, not because they try to go to these different, the CIA, FBI, eventually talk to, Abigail, and she points out, which the others pointed out, that there's no way anybody can, steal the Declaration of Independence, because it's something that important is protected almost to the same degree as probably the president himself. It's such an important document. But knowing Ian the way Ben appears to, it's he'll find a way to break in and steal this thing. So reading a passage from the Declaration of Independence, realizing men at that time knew what they were, the founding fathers fighting off the British to claim their own independence as a nation, knowing that if they failed, they would be tried for treason and hanged. So they did what they knew what they had to do, despite it being like on the outside on in, it was just like, oh man, that's crazy. You can't just, do that. And because it's, because the most powerful nation in the world of that time was Great Britain. And these, not union, but it's like these band of people who are the underdogs in this fight managed to beat back a powerful nation. And it's been like many stories throughout history and in later dates after the American Revolution where like so many times the underdog managed to beat back a powerful nation because they're on like a unknown land to most of the other countries. Like you see that from Vietnam fighting back America and won every time somebody tried to go on their land. Same thing with like Iraq, beating back America once again. It's just that the only time, or even in current day with Ukraine situation, they managed to hold their own against Russia being technically, technologically superior. But they managed to beat them back. So time and time again, unless you got like multiple nations convening on a few others, more often than not, because that's the thing with using like WW2 for example. Sure, Germany had like Japan and I think Italy as the Axis power. But every other nation beat them back, before Hitler tried to take over. But unlike that scenario, if like one nation is trying to, step on the backyard or somebody else's stuff unprovoked, then you get something like Vietnam, where it's like, no, you're not taking over our land for any number of reasons. But anyway, so learning from these founding fathers, Ben decides, okay, I'm going to have to steal this document to prevent like Ian from stealing it, because and it's kind of ironic being an Englishman with zero respect for something as this American document. And so it's kind of like, wow, that's kind of deep if you think about it. So he's like, of somebody who does not care about this sacred document, it's important that somebody from that nation to go there, take it to prevent any harm to, because like, I'd rather like, as American who appreciate history as much as Ben do, he would probably prefer he take it, run proper tests on it, while at the same time making sure it is not damaged in the process, as opposed to Ian, who would not only take it, will run a battery of tests, damn the consequences of this sacred document. He even make like a comment to a police officer, by Sandusky. It's like, I don't want to see any cops around, otherwise you'll find your precious document in a box of confetti. So it's like, he just so glib about it. It's like, okay, I appreciate things about America. Sure, they did some shitty stuff throughout the years towards people who aren't, the same as your typical white male. But there are good things about it that more often than not outweighs the problematic issues that it also has. Hell, there's no nation in this country that doesn't have their own problematic history. But there are certain important things that are good about this country, like the National Monument and the Bill of Rights and our like our like the Declaration of Independence. Is so many important things that is so sacred to the American populace as a whole, and what our beliefs are founded upon, and and we will fight for that stuff if push comes to shove. And fight for the belief that is hold truths to that. It's the same thing. Was like you look at it in terms of like Superman. He fight for truth and justice, and like Batman is like his symbol is like he's a symbol for hope. Well, Superman is a symbol for hope, but it was like how Batman Begins put it, where it's like as a symbol, I can be everlasting. I can, as a man, I can be destroyed, I can be ignored, but as a symbol, I can be everlasting. I can, I can be incorruptible. That's how, like, the Declaration of Independence and items like that is looked upon as something incorruptible, as something everlasting, a symbol for hope. That's what we will fight for. And not for any president or things like that. Is what a nation stand for. That's what we fight for. So, and that's where we get in the heist type of part of this film, where Riley is like hesitant on doing this because like there's so many barriers to prevent anybody from even like breathing wrong on this thing. But Ben points out where, well, there's only one small time window that we can gain access to with little amount of security, is when the preservation room, where they make sure everything is okay and stuff like that. And so that's their window. And so it so happens they're doing this on this 70th anniversary gala thing. So that's where they go, and they Ben sees like, oh, Abigail has this kind of coin collection from different points of history or something like that, and one of the coins he has, so he gifts it to her, but is covered in this kind of solution where it highlights her fingerprints. Because she's like an archivist, she will have like the access to the preservation room. So once they get inside, they see like the code highlighted on the keyboard, and it turns out the code to be like Valley Forge, and many people point out how dumb that is, because why would a historian put in something so like something like Valley Forge, an historical thing where you could have just like, my passwords to stuff isn't like superhero related, honestly, because that'd be kind of dumb. But it's kind of like Spaceballs. If you watch Spaceballs movie, where it's like Lord Helmet is trying to get this password from this king, and the king is like, the password is 1 2 3 4 5, and it's like, he was like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. It's like some moron put on his luggage. And then here comes Mel Brooks, is like, amazing, that's the same password as my luggage. And that always stuck with me. That was so freaking funny. And it's like, wow, that is so like, at least mix it up with like Valley, Ben Franklin or Lincoln Forge or something like that, or or just do some something trivial like your mother's maiden name with 727 or something like that, so it wouldn't be so easy to figure out. But he managed to get in. He's trying to like, because it's in this protective case, and he's trying to like take this power drill to unscrew the thing. But here comes Ian, and he managed to make off with it. And Abigail finds out because like Ben was like stupidly like cryptic about his last line to her before he left the party. So he uh follows she follows him. Ian picks her up after she tried to steal back the Declaration of Independence from Ben, but Ben and Riley save her and gave Ian the slip. And because they can't go back to Ben's house where he has, this kind of like a protective bubble thing where they'll like try to decipher what's behind the Declaration of Independence safely, because since he tried to get the slip, but the museum's crap, the what you call those people, the souvenir shop, sees him thinking that he was trying to slip out with a copy of a Declaration of Independence without paying for it. So he he doesn't have like $30 some odd in his wallet, so he had to pay with a card, because the only way he can get out of there with that thing. But now that they got the information on file, they just did the SWAT, everybody convening on Ben's apartment. And here is where you see like it's funny to look back on older films and you see certain people that's like a big deal to you in present day that they weren't back then. One of the police officers turns out to be Mark Pellegrino, not Pellegrino, Mark, is it Pellegrino? Mark something. Crap, what is it? Yeah, I did get it right. Mark Pellegrino, who turns out to be Lucifer on the Supernatural TV show. I was like, because I think I saw this movie a couple of years ago, and I watched that because he's only there for a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, that's, the guy who's going to be like a big deal in a decade and some change. But anyway, yeah, you look back on that, you'll see him as he was helping out on a computer, help early on in getting towards the second act, helping out the Sandusky on the computer after they discovered like his Ben's apartment. So knowing that they also have to go and get, because he also need the Silence Dogood letters, which is the pen name of Benjamin Franklin, used to publish his writing material. So the original letters, his father has. And so they decided, okay, we gotta go to his dad's house, who doesn't want any part of this entire thing because he feel like he wasted a lot of his life trying to find this treasure that like him and previous Gates family members tried to do and failed, and like he doesn't want to waste any more of his life. So he's just ashamed of his son, the fact that he's now wasting his life trying to find this kind of treasure that he should have gave up on, because their family's been like a laughing stock. So he goes to the house, and once Abigail, who's now on board, is like, okay, so if we got it here, we'll use some like lemon juice in order to like help, if it's because it's invisible ink that they use to keep like the map kind of secret. There's invisible ink that only highlights using like a particular solution, and lemon juice kind of lifts that up temporarily, and they see that there is something there. So it turns out to be a cipher. and they need the letters in order to figure out, the words to this numerical sequence. And Patrick, points out, like, I donated that to the Franklin Institute a long time ago. And so they end up going to, but now they wanted fugitives. They can't just walk in there without being spotted immediately. So Riley pays this little kid in order to look at the letters that's on display, write down a few words at a time for $1, and come back to so that Riley can write it down in a proper sentence. Of course, Ian eventually shows up and sees this, and almost, and then, like, asks the kid, like, what's the word that he was about to give him for $100, and he said it was stow. So they look it up, and I noticed this, and many other people pointed out, how is it somebody like Ian, who, sure, like, British people can't live in America or anything like that, but just that he's able to figure certain things out and just be slightly a step behind Ben this whole way, where he should have been stuck on certain points. But he has the internet and what have you, but it's just like, it's like me going to France and trying to beat this French historian and find this, historical artifact, a French artifact, and I'm catching up right behind him, and I shouldn't even gone past, like, probably the second or third level. It just makes no sense. Honestly, Ben has, mindset has the headspace for this type of this adventure. Ian should not. Whether or not he was, born and raised in America or brought over at a young age, he wouldn't have this kind of deep level of, like, knowledge on how to get to solve these kind of clues. But anyway, also, speaking of, like, Mark Pellegrino, like, crazy casting, there was on Ian's team, there's this character who was in The Predators, the third movie in the Predator lineup. That Russian guy who was on that game preserve with Adrian Brody and everybody, he's also on Ian's team. Like, because watching that film, I actually do love that film. You can watch my Predator reviews up on my channel as well. And yeah, that guy's there. It's fun looking back on old films and see certain people that's like background characters that will maybe not necessarily become big deals, but they still are acting, and you see them in, like, some stuff later on. I was like, oh yeah, oh wow, you had, like, a big part in there, and look at you now. But after they figure out about, like, this stow thing, which leads them to Independence Hall, and and I love this moment where, after figuring out, like, on the back of a $100 bill, there's a clock tower and it has a specific time on there, and they think, like, oh, we missed our window of opportunity today. We probably have to wait till tomorrow in order to try to find the location of the next clue, because it's like a sundial kind of situation. But I like Riley, because I don't know. Here's the thing about Riley, because I like him as a character, and in the beginning of the film, he seems like the tech guy, but halfway through the film, the writers kind of relegated him to almost like, lovable goofball or something like that, where it's like, what's a Ottendorf cipher, and it's like a tech guy would probably have at least some inkling of what that means. At the very least, the word cipher. But I don't know. But I like this moment here, where after they trying to change some clothes, he points everybody, Ben and Abigail's like, oh my God, we missed it. And he's like, no, we didn't. And they look at him and I was like, what, you don't know? And like, oh wow, I know something that you don't know. And he just wants to roll. And I kind of like this moment right here. To Abigail, like, I won't say uncharacteristically, but she's like, Riley is, because she kind of like, kind of snaps it. But it's like, girl, like, you just got on board. I've been friends with him longer than you did. Like, don't snap at me. But it's kind of like if you're, teaming up with the Bat family and they're trying to solve this clue and they got stumped on it, but you know the answer. And the fact that you would want to revel in it. And the fact that you even know something that Batman does not know, you want to let that marinate for just a little bit. Because oh my God, like, wait a minute, Batman, you don't know this? Oh wow, this must be how you feel all the time. Because it's like, honey, hold on, let me just absorb this for a minute, because you never want to get this. You better get one time you get the one up Batman on something, and it's like you want to let it sit in it for a while. As good as Batman is, you want to let that sit. So that's how like Riley is. It's like okay, of course they're losing daylight, but it's just like give them a minute, okay. But he realized that daylight savings time was not a thing yet when this whole cipher thing was being, all these little clues and stuff was being set up. And of course, we learned Benjamin Franklin invented daylight savings time. But so they got at least a good 20-30 minutes before the actual time. So they find these bifocals, obviously because Benjamin Franklin kind of helped modernize the eyewear. These kind of old school 3D glasses kind of thing, where they finally can read the entire thing, and you see this message on the back of the Independence, which, by the way, was, Ben is kind of having a moment here where it's like the actual document, the Declaration of Independence, is in Independence Hall, where it was the last time this piece of paper was in this place was when it was being signed. So imagine that would be kind of a good big deal, because it's like a very sacred thing that has been apart from a particular place when it was last in. So I would imagine it would be a big deal. So they realize it's about some kind of Trinity Church, which then they realize, Ian's showing up, and at the same time, the cops eventually, grab Ben. He tells them everything, at least what he can tell them, and he comes to realize, what's more to that Trinity Church thing. But Abigail and Riley get in touch with Ian because there's no way they can break Ben out themselves. So in order to, if Ian wants the next clue, he needs to help them get Ben away from the cops. So of course he does, and they go to the Trinity Church because now they also grab his dad, and so they go to this underground passage, and then Ben weirdly just randomly just kisses Abigail, and it's at most I think it was more it's kind of like the first movie Speed when I reviewed last year, where it's was it last year or early this year? I reviewed the movie Speed with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, where it's it's the adrenaline that got these two hot for each other, the whole danger situation. But maybe you can make an excuse for that, but it's just you don't just randomly kiss a chick like that. And I think most movies nowadays would not play that anymore. Where it's like, no matter the circumstance, you don't just yank a girl like, come here. And this, of course, it's kind of like based off of a certain like old school kind of like serials where like, the male adventurer just like yanks a woman that's tagging along with him close and then just make out with her kind of thing. And she's just all for it. But, I mean, she could be all for it, but even still, it's kind of like inappropriate. But that aside, they make their way down this, kind of like wooden staircase that's freaking dilapidated, and one of Ian's men falls to his death. They make it down to seemingly a dead end, but Patrick makes up a story about, oh, this is Lantern. It means like, about like what's his name? They're like, the British are coming. That guy. It's like, about the whole thing about the Lantern situation. Paul Revere. And so Ian leads them down there in case, there's like another clue that he needs. He knows where they are at. So that's when using that same pipe he still have in order to find his other secret passageway, where it also seemed like another dead end, just for like anybody, to like kind of fall for, like another trick. But if you're smart enough, which Ben is, because he, for a moment, he had like a doubt there. But he realized, okay, they, these Freemasons tunneled their way all the way down here. They had to figure out a way to get out. So they found another passage, thanks to the pipe. It's kind of like, an added key. And they find this extra hidden chamber filled with all this treasure from different, civilizations. You see like a Egyptian kind of like statue and all these other gold trinkets and stuff like that, Roman era and all this other stuff. And so they see a staircase going up and leads them out. They meet up with Sandusky, and Ben points out like, I want us free and clear for all charges. Don't want to go to jail. Riley and the Gates family gets the credit for the discovery of all this treasure and everything like that. And he just gives like the Declaration of Independence to Sandusky, and he's like, you just gave away your bargaining chip. And he points out like the Declaration of Independence is not a bargaining chip. He had his love for history and things like this. It's not something you should leverage. There are some things that are sacred, But, Sandusky was like, somebody has to go to jail. And it's like, oh, well, point you to the right person to take to jail. And so, they run a sting operation, find Ian, and lo and behold, it's probably at least a couple of more, but Sean Bean in this does not die. Of course, it's part of a Disney movie. This probably doesn't die, but it's like he is famously on record of dying like probably the most times than any other actor. And it's like he doesn't die in this, and it kind of blew my mind. It's like, wow, he doesn't die in this? I think the first time I saw Sean Bean in anything was in GoldenEye, and I probably hold that probably near and dear to my heart. And the other time, I see him in other stuff too. The stuff that kind of is in the forefront of my mind is this movie, GoldenEye, and Game of Thrones. And that's probably like my favorite Sean Bean type of roles that I've seen him in. So now Ben orchestrates, where all the treasure they found, they go to their respective museums around the world, like like the American Museum, the most famous American Museum, one in the Louvre and the other in Cairo, because this the treasure belongs to the world, and of course they end up getting like 1% of the earnings, which is still pretty wealthy, all things considered, the amount of treasure that was found. And Abigail and Patrick, gets a nice home together. And you find out later in the next film that Riley becomes like a acclaimed author and everything like that. So yeah, that was National Treasure. Like I said, this is like a fun film. It's a nice little fun adventure film. And of course, this is one of those few rare movies where Nicolas Cage is a little bit more like, because Nicolas Cage usually, we all love Nicolas Cage when he's all like, like doing his Nicolas Cage, kind of, not to say aggressive, but like very expressive personality. But he knows how to tame it, and he knows, and like, somebody like Jerry Bruckheimer, who directed this film, not, directed, but helped write this film, or produce it, I should say. And, the director was like John Turtletube. But they know how to, like, okay, manage this. So it's like, it's one of his subtle performances, but still, he, everything else is so out there where he doesn't need to add to that. He just like, he like, turns it down to like, instead of always being a 10, he turns down to like a 6 or a 5. But it's still entertaining. Like, I love Nicolas Cage and everything he's in. He's like, it's like an anomaly. It's like, there's a lot of great actors that I love, but sometimes they, more often than not, are in stuff that, like, I don't feel like he's like, he or she didn't do well in this particular film. They normally are great, but just one's probably not fit for them, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't feeling it. But Nicolas Cage, out of all the actors that I can remember, he's the only one that no matter what he's in, even if the writing around him is terrible, will never be the problem. It's like, I can never say that by any other actor that, because a lot of actors probably have like at least dozens, if not hundreds of roles. And, most of them they could be great in, but there's always going to be some caveats where it's like, yeah, I wasn't feeling Christopher Plummer in this particular role, but I personally cannot say that about Nicolas Cage. He's the only one I cannot say that about. I like every role he's in. But anyway, next week I will be covering National Treasure Book of Secrets, so look out for that next Thursday. But in like 10 minutes, I'll be covering Season 3 of X-Men Evolution. Season 1 and 2, my spoiler reviews on that is getting like, big, like, views. So thank you all for that, because there's a lot of people still love X-Men Evolution. It's an amazing show. But I'll be covering like Season 3 in a few minutes, and then I'll be hopping back onto FF16 to wrap up tonight. But anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of National Treasure. What was your favorite Nick Cage performance, role, movie? Leave a comment below, and I will see you all soon. Take care.